Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning for this week's Come Follow Me lesson with the Mormon News Report podcast. My name is Jenny Noonan Dye, and I am joining you from Provo, Utah, along with my husband, John Dye. He is the one who is responsible for all that you see on your screen for those of you who are joining us via the live video stream. As always, for those who are participating here in real time, we'd love to hear from you, where you're from, what stood out to you in your study this week, whether it's the first time or the 50th time you've read these verses, or even if you didn't read them at all. We get to as many comments as we can, just as we would if we were all gathered together in person. We like to try to use this space and time as a supplement to your other Come Follow Me studies, to sometimes take a deeper dive into at least one aspect of the lesson that stands out. We love having your participation and feedback. Today is October 17th, 2021, and the lesson is called His Sacrifice Shall Be More Sacred Unto Me Than His Increase. And it covers Doctrine and Covenants, sections 115 to 120. This morning we are starting a little bit later than we typically would, and our lesson will actually probably be shorter than it normally would. Today it's John and myself who are coming to you. So we hope that you will feel inspired and comfortable in participating via the comments section here today. Of course, as always, excusing my Mormon News Report co-host Brent Malone in Detroit as he tends to family business, as well as Ben Bernard's in California as he does the same. Good morning to Randall in Heber Valley, Utah. Congratulations on your recent temple announcement there in the Heber Valley. Today is His sacrifice shall be more sacred unto me than his increase. And if you study the sections, again, Doctrine and Covenants, sections 115 to 120, you'll notice that a couple of sections are very short, as in one verse. So not a ton of reading and study this week, but still important just the same. Good morning to, is it Malika? Yes, in San Bruno, California. Thanks for being here this morning. So this section covers a lot of things that actually have been covered, or this section, not just this section, but this lesson covers things that have been covered recently in general conference talks and otherwise. So it's very interesting to address them. We're not going to get to all of them, but I do want to focus on a couple of points. John, do you have anything to say before we kind of jump in?
No, just welcomed everyone. We're glad to have you and to talk about today's lesson. And I think we're just going to cover some of the best of, right?
I think so, yeah.
Truncate this a little bit today, but that's kind of the thought, I think.
Yes, and like we mentioned before, this is intended as a supplement. So whether or not in your own other studies, whether personally, as a family, or even as a class, you covered these points, remains to be seen. So one thing that really stood out to me, and I think to John as well, because as we were talking about it, right as I was talking about it, he was looking at the same thing, is the idea of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints being a defense and a refuge. In section 115, verses 4 through 6.
Oh, and I've got two of those.
Yes.
I can share my screen though.
Oh, okay. That's all right. We can, okay, great.
Go ahead.
So again, Doctrine and Covenants, section 115, verses 4 through 6. Those read, "For thus shall my church be called in the last days, even the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Verily I say unto you all, arise and shine forth, that thy light may be a standard for the nations, and that the gathering together upon the land of Zion, upon her stakes, may be for a defense, and for a refuge from the storm, and from wrath, when it shall be poured out without mixture upon the whole earth." So the Zion and her stakes may be for a defense and for a refuge from the storm. What do you think that means, or what has that meant to you in your life? John, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, say that one more time. Zion may be a defense and a refuge from the storm.
Yeah, in verse 6, "And that the gathering together upon the land of Zion, and upon her stakes may be for a defense and for a refuge from the storm and from wrath, when it shall be poured out without mixture upon the whole earth.
I think we've talked about this before, but Zion is, sorry, I'll add a picture so you don't feel like, Zion is, multiple things. It's a literal location, right? People have looked at it that way. Zion is the pure in heart. So Zion has, there's multiple definitions for Zion. So when I think of the way it's being used in those verses, it's finding individuals who are, similar, like-minded, that have the same desires that we have, and the strength that comes from those individuals when we are together to be able to bolster one another, to strengthen the feeble knees and the hands that hang down, lift up the hands that hang down, do those types of things, because I think that's really what we're talking about. Not only a communal type perspective, but also what does that mean from a Heavenly Father pouring down light and knowledge upon us and giving us the strength, which allows us to continue the communal aspect of the way at least they were living at the time.
Yeah, great points. I mean, like you mentioned, Zion has been considered a physical place, especially as we study these early days of church history, but also it is a state of mind. It is that that communal being together, even if it's not, in a physical place. And I know that there have been times, I guess, just from my own life, where I felt alone, specifically when I grew up in a place where there weren't a lot of other people that I knew who were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It was very easy to feel alone and on my own, and that it was a very heavy burden to bear, meaning the way that I lived, or kind of trying to defend the way that I lived or wanted to live. And that was difficult. As I've gotten older and as I've met more people and traveled more places and seen more things, even when I'm not physically around others, it helps to know emotionally and mentally that, in fact, we are not alone in our struggles and in the storms from which we need defending.
Had I known you were going this direction, Michael McLean would have been cute.
No.
Michael McLean.
Nope. So those are just some thoughts that I had. And one image that is actually in the manual that I liked, and I think you liked as well, John, is that of a lighthouse.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, and we'll play a video toward the end, but as we consider lighthouses, and again, this is directly from the manual, but I think it's very apropos, right? The light in the darkness. And how do you amplify that light? That's one thing that they'll talk about in this video, which I think is very instructive. But the purpose of a lighthouse, and in the olden days, they used to light fires literally on the shores, and hopefully people could see them. And if they couldn't, it was just very complex, right? If the rain was inclement, which usually causes like you see here, if there's a lot of rain, it's hard to not only start a fire, but to keep a fire going on a shore. And obviously the waters are rough, and it's hard really to see what that shoreline looks like. And the purpose of the lighthouse and the fires that predate the lighthouses were to help navigate sailors through, issues that they may have, shallow areas, rocks that protrude and could cause danger to the ship itself. And we have multiple hymns that are based on lighthouses, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a great analogy. So again, as we talk about this, and we'll again share a video, but just the way that they are able to amplify that little bit of light and direct it because of the way that the lighthouses work, the way that those prisms work, is absolutely incredible. And again, we're not going into science, the 400 level of science here to talk about prisms, but this kind of shows you that the way the glass is created and the way that the prisms are constructed, it amplifies and it really focuses that light, so that again, a small light can be have great strength and actually do the purpose for which it is intended, which is to guide ships through these dangerous areas.
Yeah, thank you. And I like you said, we are going to show a short video about that at the end. But as we were talking, you and I, John, this morning about lighthouses, and I was thinking about them and how, like you mentioned, there's the higher light at the top, but it was the combination of the light at the top and the lower light. The combination helped, again, ships navigate through storms to get to safety, get to a refuge. And excuse me, phrase that came to my mind is that we use and hear often, out of the mouth of two or three witnesses. And that lighthouse provides two witnesses. Because is one light, and letting that one light torch and fire or whatever it happens to be, our own lights shine, is that helpful? Certainly it is. But it is the combination, again, as we learn more about how that lighthouse works, or review it for those who are already familiar.
Yeah, very good. Good thought.
That makes the difference. And again, thanks for your patience and us starting a little later. And we did mention that this will be a little bit of a shorter lesson. But one other thing that I wanted to talk about is the idea of tithing. Here in sections 119 and 120, a lot is discussed about tithing. By paying tithing, we help build and sanctify the land of Zion. So in Doctrine and Covenants, section 119, verse 6, it reads, "And I say unto you, if my people observe not this law to keep it holy, and by this law sanctify the land of Zion unto me, that my statutes and my judgments may be kept thereon, that it may be most holy, behold, verily I say unto you, it shall not be a land of Zion unto you." So what I gather from that is that part of creating Zion is that paying tithing.
One thought there too, there were some issues, right? The law of consecration was given before, and traditionally that was given to some of the higher church leaders. The expectation was they would live it. But there were issues there, right? They ran into some issues. So many people see this as a lesser law. The tithing being a lesser law, as we seek and strive to live the law of consecration and have all things in common. And that, again, those are different opinions, different thoughts that people have, but it's true. And, as a young kid, I remember watching The Windows of Heaven with Lorenzo Snow, right? And
I don't
do you
know
remember that?
I don't know what that is, but,
okay.
but I'll learn from you.
Okay. So I'll have to show you. It's a really early video that the church put out, but basically the church was not paying tithing at the time of Lorenzo Snow. And he went down to St. George or southern Utah and actually was able to make promises. The church was basically going to go defunct because the finances were not in order. He went down to southern Utah, made some promises. They were suffering a drought, and basically the bottom line of the movie was, because people started paying tithing and showing their faith in that way, their temporal lives were blessed, right? They started receiving rain. Their crops, which had been failing or faltering because of lack of rain and sustenance, started to do more. So anyway, that's kind of what that was all about. And whether it's a lesser law or not, it still takes faith to use the principles of faith that we need to pay tithing. That's that. And the church needs our tithing, right? The church requires that to continue to move forward. Could the Lord do his work without us paying tithing? Absolutely. Do we need to pay tithing to learn, sacrifice and giving? And I think those are the words that are used in this lesson, our sacrifice, which I think are very instructive.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I want to just cover really quickly Doctrine and Covenants, section 120, verse 1 kind of goes over how that works, because you mentioned the church functioning with tithes and offerings. But again, 120 verse 1 says, "Verily thus saith the Lord, the time is now come that it shall be disposed of by a council composed of the first presidency of my church, and of the bishop and his council, and by my high council, and by mine own voice unto them, saith the Lord." So I want to share this in the manual, this counsel on the disposition of tithes, right? A lot of times, part of our questions, and again, remember, a recurring theme here is that questions aren't a bad thing. We're all here because of questions. Is who decides where the money for tithing goes, or the resources for tithing? Elder Robert D. Hales, back in the fall of 2002, so almost 20 years ago, gave this counsel and instruction. He said, "As revealed by the Lord, the use of tithing is determined by a council comprised of the first presidency, the quorum of the 12 apostles, and the presiding bishopric. The Lord specifically states that the council's work be directed by mine own voice unto them." And that's that verse we just read together. This council is called the Council on the Disposition of the Tithes. It is remarkable to witness this council heed the Lord's voice. Each member is aware of and participates in all the council's decisions. No decision is made until the council is unanimous. All tithing funds are spent for the purposes of the church, including welfare, care for the poor and needy, temples, building and upkeep of meeting houses, education, curriculum, in short, the work of the Lord. I bear my testimony of the council on the disposition of the tithes. I have sat on this council for 17 years as the presiding bishop of the church, and now as a member of the quorum of the 12 apostles. Without exception, the tithing funds of this church have been used for his purposes. And it's nice to hear that testimony again from nearly 20 years ago, and I pair that kind of with Sister Eubank, President Sharon Eubank, from the First Council from the Relief Society General Presidency, and her talk in General Conference just a few weeks ago. Her talk is called "I Pray He'll Use Us," and the gist of it, again, the summary is that small efforts collectively make a big impact, magnifying the many individual things we do as disciples of Jesus Christ. And I would invite any of you who, whether you did or did not hear that talk, to go back and either listen to it or read it, because it is, in my opinion, similar to what we just read from Elder Hales, and in a more modern and current day immediate context.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good way to tie that in. And one thing, and I'm a little reticent to bring this up, but the recent court case with Huntsman and utilizing tithing funds to basically,
which case was dismissed.
Yes, exactly. And basically it was, when we give our tithing to the church and to the Lord, that is something that we trust in these individuals, right? The council on the disposition of tithes to do what is best there. And I think it shows faith in our leadership, that they're doing what they can and should do. And that's important, I think, for us to show faith in the leaders of the Lord, that they're utilizing those sacred funds in the way that is best for the body of the church. Sure.
And not just the body of the church, but for the world and humanity in general.
Sure.
I think in the past several years, there's been kind of a desire for and a delivering of more transparency with where those tithes and offerings go. And I think that we would do well to remember and understand that we don't know the needs around the world. It's rare that we truly understand the needs outside of our own. And so to have that faith and just kind of trust that it will go where it needs to go is an exercise in faith, and frankly contributes to the building up of Zion.
Yes.
So
good.
That's actually all that I've got. So quick mini lesson.
Yeah, we've got a video we can end on, which again talks more about lighthouses and the importance of sharing our light
Mhm.
and ways that we can do that, and why the lighthouse is an apt analogy.
And before we go, I just want to remind everyone that this coming week's study is called "O God, Where Art Thou?" And it covers Doctrine and Covenants, sections 121 through 123, and that the day for discussion for that will be next Sunday, October 24th. So again, thank you all for joining us, and we will end on this video. Hope you have a great week, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Speak soon.
Light are iconic seaside signalling spires that have guided mariners round the twists and turns of dangerous coastal obstacles for millennia. But how do they actually work? And what on earth is this? Let's jump in and find out. And make sure you stick around for the whole video as we talk to a real lighthouse keeper. First off, a little bit of history. Lights on shore help sailors safely navigate the ocean. The earliest lighthouses used wood or coal fires, but it's obviously not ideal to lug fuel to the top of a tower every day. Next were candles, gas lamps, and oil lamps. But firelight isn't actually that bright, and as you can imagine, fires inside tall structures is a major safety hazard. So when electricity was discovered, lighthouses began switching to electric bulbs, which were brighter, and which is what most lighthouses use today. So how do lighthouses actually direct that light far out to sea where it can be seen by ships? In many cases, the answer is this beautiful structure, the Fresnel Lens. Up until the 1800s, lighthouses had used reflectors behind the light source to direct the light outwards. Clever engineers realized that light could also be further focused using a lens in front of the light source. The problem with this idea is that a lens large enough to gather all of this light would have to be huge, not ideal for the top of a tower. Not to mention, the larger and thicker the lens, the more light is absorbed by the glass itself when the light passes through. So in the early 1820s, Fresnel, a French physicist and engineer, came up with a very elegant solution. Fresnel knew that light is refracted at the point at which it passes from one medium to another. In this case, from air to glass and back to air, and that the curved surface of the lens focuses the light in the desired direction. So he simply cut away the rest of the lens. He brought down the surface of the lens in stepped sections so that the curve of the surface was preserved and the excess internal material was discarded. This allowed for light to be focused in a particular direction while reducing absorption of light by the lens itself, because the lens was not as thick. While Fresnel wasn't the first person ever to propose this kind of prism, he certainly pioneered developments of the eponymous stepped lens. Shortly after this innovation, extra prisms were added to the top and bottom of the lens so that it could catch and redirect even more light. Fresnel lenses come in all shapes and sizes, from the smallest 6th order lenses all the way up to the 1st order lenses, and even hyper-radiant lenses, like the one at the Makapu'u Point Lighthouse, which is insanely big. This invention revolutionized lighthouses and made them even better at their job. By redirecting more light, they could be seen from an even further distance away. So that brings us to their main function, signaling. A lighthouse's utility depends on the geography surrounding it. Some lighthouses are near dangerous rocks, and others near safe entrances to harbours. Vessels can triangulate their own position relative to the known position of lights on shore. Lighthouses can use a series of flashes, and sometimes different colours, to identify themselves to mariners. This is called a light characteristic. Many lighthouses have an individual, though not necessarily unique, light characteristic. For example, the Split Point Lighthouse in Australia has a light characteristic of 4 white flashes over 20 seconds. A flash is when the light is bright only for a short time, in comparison to an occulting light, which is when the light is dark for a short time. Using a combination of these different light types with different timings and different colours means there's an infinite number of potential light characteristics. So let's find out what's inside the lantern room, right at the top, as we talk about how these flashes of light are generated. This part of the video has heaps of incredibly beautiful Fresnel lenses, mostly thanks to Artworks Florida, a company that actually makes and restores Fresnel lenses. There'll be a link to their channel below. Some lighthouses have a rotating lens, made up of several bullseye-like Fresnel lenses. As each lens rotates around the light source, the bullseyes beam light out in a single direction. As the narrow beam of light sweeps across the ocean, from a ship, it looks like the light is flashing. In reality, the light is always on, and it's the rotation of the lens that gives the flashing effect. Some lighthouses use a Fresnel lens with a belt-like center. In this case, the lens can be in a fixed position, and the light itself turns on and off, and the lens directs the flashing light in a wide angle. Again, from a ship, it looks like a flashing light, but this time because it is a flashing light. But flashes aren't the only way lighthouses communicate. Some lighthouses use colored filters to change the color of the light depending on the angle that they're viewed from. For example, this lighthouse has red filters on the far left and far right. Also note the opaque paint to stop the light from flashing backwards onto the land. When viewed from these directions, mariners will know that they may be approaching unsafe rocks. You might have noticed that the Cape Byron Lighthouse at Byron Bay, Australia, has two light characteristics. That's because its normal characteristic is a flashing white light, but it also has a secondary light that shines a fixed beam of red light towards some dangerous rocks nearby. Some lighthouses also signal during the day, using day marks. These distinctive markings make it easy for lighthouses to be identified during the day, again aiding navigation. Before telecommunication and GPS, lighthouses could also signal with flags during the day and Morse-coded lights at night, but these methods are somewhat obsolete today. Of course, many lighthouses don't quite look like the romantic buildings of old, and many now use LED lights or directional lighting systems other than Fresnel lenses, like this tower with a rotating light. In fact, when I visited this tower on a recent trip, it got me thinking, since this tower doesn't have a lantern room at the top, can we call it a lighthouse? What makes a lighthouse compared to any other coastal lights? To help us answer that question, I asked a modern-day lighthouse keeper.
Hi, my name is Spence, and I'm a modern-day lighthouse keeper. We're going to talk a little bit about what makes a lighthouse and how they may differ from an actual light station. Now, there are many different aids to navigation, everything from buoys and beacons and sector lights and lighthouses. Lighthouses typically is a tall cylindrical structure with a cupola on top and a beacon or a light inside which flashes light, helping show mariners where they are on the water. Another such important light is what they call a sector light. Now, a sector light is a light which helps to guide mariners through a channel or a more dangerous area where they may be transferring from one channel to another and there's a difficult curve or a difficult area to navigate. So what about a light station? A light station is a base of operations that the Coast Guard can use that usually has a lighthouse or a sector light or another very important light that's used in navigation. Now, a light station will have many different buildings, including a dwelling for a light keeper to live in, maybe a workshop, an engine room for providing power, and a boathouse, a dock, a radio room. There's all kinds of different areas on the station that can be used by the keepers or by Coast Guard personnel in case of an emergency, or even by mariners who are in a state of emergency and need to go to a light station for aid. I hope you found this information helpful and it provided you with a little bit more insight into what makes a lighthouse, what makes a light station, and what it's like to be a lighthouse keeper.
Thanks, Spence. You should all definitely check out his YouTube channel for incredible insights into the life of a lighthouse keeper. Links at the end of the video. Given that this particular lighthouse did used to have a lantern room, I think we can still call it a lighthouse. Many lighthouses now run on solar power or batteries with generators, or a combination of both. This has reduced the need for permanent lighthouse keepers, although of course they do still exist in some places, and are important for weather observations, light station maintenance, and emergency responses, among other things. Of those lighthouses that do still use Fresnel lenses, some have transitioned to cheaper and more modern acrylic lenses. But the purpose of lighthouses remains the same: a focused beacon of light, not to illuminate, but to signal. So that's how lighthouses work. They have a light source that can be fixed with a rotating lens or flashing with a fixed lens. This is beamed seawards and creates the lighthouse's light characteristic, which identifies it to anyone navigating the ocean. In the current era, where many ships primarily use the global positioning system or other systems to navigate, lighthouses aren't as relied on as they once were, but they still do serve a vital role in maritime safety. I'll play you out with this special tune thanks to Andrew Duffield, and thanks again to Artworks Florida and to Spence the Lighthouse Keeper for being a part of this video. Please do check out both of their channels if lighthouses interest you. And thanks to you for being here until right at the end. I'll see you next time.